And welcome back, fellow American patriots and Minutemen standing at the ready to fight anew for the issues that matter here at Blaze TV. On this Thursday, your host, Daniel Horowitz, here at CR Podcast to discuss some issue that maybe we could gain consensus with. You know, you look at our economic problems, our social problems, our health problems. They seem way too big for any political solution. We need God. But if there's one thing that I think we could all agree upon in this divided country, certainly if you would poll the average voter, right, left, and in between, is we want to socially distance from China. Okay, we don't want China to beat us and to continue scavenging our technology, military, scientific, trade theft, espionage. China's rise has been fueled by our own corrupt government that has sold our people out, our technology out to China. But what I want to discuss today is this is not some sort of, tedious plot, technologically advanced subversion. They've done this through the front door because we have let in and continue to let in hundreds of thousands of Chinese nationals through the front door. And that's if we didn't even have them work in sensitive academic fields, that would be a problem. But instead, we have them work in sensitive academic fields that are partnering with DARPA, with federal agencies, Department of Energy, nuclear programs, you name it. This has been known forever. So what are we doing today about it? So we're going to have on in a couple moments an old friend of mine who put out a report, a bombshell report naming specific CCP members and associated people literally working at universities on dual use military and scientific programs and what's being done about it. This is just straight out in the open, and we'll get to that coming up. But I gotta say, this is emblematic of everything going on. We don't have an administration, a party, we have a uniparty that is concerned with the ideological moorings, the well-being of this country. Everything is a pay for play. So, what's the focus? The, Commodities Trading Commissioner for Trump said he wants to preempt states from regulating betting on prediction markets. Now, I'm not taking an opinion on the underlying issue, but why is that the focus? Well, because Don Jr. is on the board of directors of the two largest prediction markets. That's why. It's the same reason why the FDA reversed course yesterday on the Moderna mRNA flu shot. Initially, Bobby Kennedy rightfully said we're not accepting an application because mRNA is dangerous. And even according to Fauci, the flu shots are garbage. So you mix the two together, mRNA and a flu shot, you get multiple, dangerous side effects and negative efficacy against the flu. Well, all media outlets are reporting they got pressure from the White House, and now they're doing it. Likewise, we have the big announcement last night, this executive order invoking the Defense Production Act in order to protect glyphosate from liability. Now, it doesn't exempt them completely like the vaccines, but it does grant Section 707 liabilities to companies when their action is in pursuance of this federal directive, producing things that are needed for national security. Of course, it's in our national security. So why now? Right as there's a bipartisan consensus that it's creating cancers, it's in our food supply, it's a problem, suddenly you see these liability bills or shield bills pop up throughout the states. And then now Trump responds with this order. That's the emergency order. mRNA, glyphosate, prediction markets. And then meanwhile, we have a DHS shutdown right now. Now, it's not really noticed yet because they're, TSA has to come in, and it's still early on. But why are we not forcing a talking filibuster? In fact, they've been off for President's Day week, forcing a talking filibuster to pass a DHS funding bill that defunds sanctuary judges and defunds sanctuary cities and institutes immigration reform that works for the American people. Just last night, or yesterday, yet another Indiana illegal alien truck driver crashed through the other side of the line, ran a red light, and killed an American in the prime of his life. This is a week after an Amish family was wiped out by yet another one. And then the Department of Transportation is taking this victory lap that somehow they dealt with it when in fact they didn't deal with it. This is part of the administrative policy to evince the image that I got it covered. Give me the ball. Give me the ball. MAGA, I got it covered. And then they jujitsu that goodwill that conservatives give them into a black hole. So yeah, they claim they're not accepting new CDLs, but they didn't revoke the existing ones. So that's going on now. And again, why is that not even discussed by the president? Why is this not looming large in the DHS funding bill? Just like the Democrats constantly pound the pavement with their messaging, what they want to do with ICE. Yet we have these stories every day and they're not used as a hammer driving into the anvil of a funding bill. So again, they tell me they could stop the filibuster, forcing a talking filibuster for the SAVE Act. So then why aren't we doing that as it relates to the DHS funding bill? By the way, the Democrats know how to deal with this. It's hilarious. In my home county, Baltimore County, they're actually using zoning to kick out ICE, that you can't build a facility. I mean, everyone agrees that's preempted by federal law. You can't do that. So we're told red states can't supplement and complement immigration law, and they just, listen to the courts. Oh yeah, I guess we're preempted, even though you're complementing immigration law. But these guys could kick ICE out, and it's like, yeah, that's totally fine. That's not preempted. Meanwhile, red states are using their power not to kick out left-wing things, but to kick out homeowners and use eminent domain for carbon capture, solar, wind, and data centers. That's what red states use their energy for, whereas blue states use it to kick out ICE. That's the asymmetry between the two parties. Utterly, utterly pathetic, folks. So yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that we're not solving the Chinese issue because, even a consensus 90-10 winning issue, we have such paralysis of initiative now where everything's a grift, everything's a transaction, everything's a pay for play with this administration. And then Con Inc. has become a pay for play, organ for the pay for play administration. So they won't focus on anything of substance. And this is why we're left with what we're left with. So that is some of the news of the day here. But I want to get back to China and our guests. So for decades, we have admitted between 270,000 and 350,000 Chinese students in any given year. That alone just shocks the consciousness that you're not just at war with a country, but the modality of their warfare is asymmetric warfare using visas, infiltration to engage in espionage, counterintelligence, and of course, trade theft. And we're like, yeah, bring them in, 300,000 a year. China is one of the top 2 sending countries, along with India, of course, for student visas. In the 2023-2024 academic year, I didn't check up this past year, but it's pretty even every year. 123,000 Chinese nationals were enrolled in graduate programs, many of them sensitive STEM programs. Another 62,000 participated in optional practical training, that illegal OPT program that was created by the executive branch, allowing them to stay in those fields. Beyond student visas, the U.S. grants over 20,000 H-1B visas to Chinese nationals each year, along with more than 12,000 J-1 visas. That's for the scholars and researchers. And we're like, well, Daniel, we want to attract talent. Oh, well, yeah. Well, some of these people are very talented. Except, here's the deal. You don't get let in or released from China to come here to either be a student or a researcher in a university if you're some schlepper or some persecuted underclass there. No, I mean, you have to, by definition, be a member of the CCP your family does. And even if somehow they aren't, they're a huge risk because you have family there that they could exploit. And we thought it was a great idea to just have them go on and and study in our universities. And by the way, we've issued nearly 2 million green cards to Chinese nationals over the last 30 years. Those are immigrant cards. It's the second biggest sending country after Mexico. And again, that doesn't mean everyone's bad. There's some great people, but it's like if you're at war with a country whose modality of attack is infiltration, asymmetric warfare, this would be a problem even if we had controls in place, but we don't. So I never understood how here we are. We're 6 years after the Senate Homeland Security Subcommittee put out a report, 2019, bipartisan report detailing how 10,000 Chinese nationals were conducting research in the Department of Energy's national labs. The report found that foreign-born researchers employed by U.S. Scientific agencies were secretly funded by China. Obviously, they openly have the 1,000 Talents program. And the program concluded, quote, American taxpayer-funded research has contributed to China's global rise over the last 20 years. So basically, we have funded their rise. Everything they've gotten, they've scavenged from us. And honestly, 6 years later, I don't see any improvement on this front. And before we bring on our guest, I want to add on one more point here. We're told throughout this data center AI debate that we got to beat China. That like ends all discussions. So, we can't discuss what type of AI, what type of cost benefit analysis, what type of capital we're going to flow to perhaps more efficient uses of AI that are less harmful to ag land, to power, to water, and actually produce something of substance like quantum computing rather than chatbot slop and shitification of the internet. But we're told we have to do this to beat China. But then the question is, why is it that we're letting them in the front door to work on all of our sensitive programs, including AI and AI as it relates to military weapons? So with us today is an old friend of mine that put out a bombshell report actually taking these abstract concerns that we've seen before, with these Senate reports, and has named at least 21 known Chinese nationals with ties to the CCP, even their military industrial complex, universities that are doing research on the most sensitive programs. You could name them. He named them. What are we doing about it? So with us today is Tom Jones. It's been so long since we've had him on. He is, and this is a very, very important organization, the American Accountability Foundation. He has over 100-page report on this, other things as well. He's a former staffer for Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Ted Cruz. We worked on some campaign stuff together back when we used to care about primaries. With us in the flesh from his headquarters. Tom, welcome to Blaze Media, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's good to talk with you again. It's been a little while.
It has been. Yeah, I'm remembering those good old days.
Senate Conservatives Fund, all the good stuff back then.
Gosh, back when we cared about primaries, we kind of understood that no party represented us, and then we fell asleep for 10 years. So, obviously, you heard my filibuster there, my intro. I want to turn it over to you. Give us the top lines of what is unique about your expose about the CCP infiltration of our academic dual-use scientific programs beyond what we've kind of known from Senate reports in recent years.
Yeah. So, what AAF is always trying to focus on is people. We're people-centric. So, kind of our animating thesis is bad things happen because of bad people. And what we endeavor to do with this report that is really different than I think folks have done in the past is, like you said, we went down and named names. We looked around this space and we looked around the concerns about China, and we're kind of like, look, we don't need another white paper that says, hey, we should be really worried about Chinese infiltration of our universities. we've identified that threat. There's people have written on that. We know that this is a concern, and at least we should know that this is a concern. What we wanted to do is say, okay, cool, let's take it out of the 30,000 foot ephemeral discussion of like, hey, this is a threat, we need to be cognizant of it. And let's start talking about what that means in real life. What does that mean at our national labs, at our national institutes of health? What does it mean at our universities? Who are the people and what are they doing with specificity and individual focus that says, hey, here is this individual, here's their connections to the Chinese Communist Party or banned defense contractors in China, and here's what they're doing at your university. Because we think when we can do that, hopefully it galvanizes people to go, man, like this is bad news. We need to fix these problems, and ultimately kind of empower folks, particularly down at the state level. Look, like I worked on the Hill, I've worked in DC. I finally got out of DC. I'm down in Kentucky. But I realize, like, if we wait for kind of Congress to do something on this, like I'll be older and grayer than I already am. But there are some really good folks at the state level that can see this and be like, hey, I think I can do something, particularly in kind of flagship state universities, which is where we're seeing a lot of these problems. We can do things to fix these because look, the president of Indiana University is sitting down with Mike Braun regularly. He can work to fix these. So that's what we wanted to do. We want to kind of put together these individual case studies of here are the people, here's the problems, here's what they're doing, and then hopefully it gives policymakers a real clear rationale on, hey, here's what we've got to fix this because we've got this dude in our drone software department that's doing this crazy stuff that we probably shouldn't be supporting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand this because, like I said, in the abstract, it would be a problem if you had this many visas to Chinese when it's not just a abstract threat, but they have a program designed to infiltrate, but then we just directly bring them in. So let's talk about some examples. Now, I'm really bad with names here.
So am I.
Qianying Cao had a postdoctoral research assistant she's a postdoctoral research assistant at Brown University in a mathematics lab funded by military agencies.
Yeah, exactly. By the services. Yeah.
So you say she led the CCP chapter on her Chinese university campus? Yeah.
And so, we partnered with, I don't speak a word of Mandarin. So, when I do these research projects, if I don't have the skill set, I bring in experts that do. So we brought in folks that did that have Mandarin language skills, that are fluent, and that also have subject matter expertise in China. These are folks that know the space, have worked there. And what we started, that's what we saw with her: connections on her campus, an active CCP participant on the campus, kind of you would kind of the equivalent of a party activist in America. She was was a party activist in China at her home campus. And that's, you kind of touched on this at the beginning, is folks that come over here like this, it isn't like when our kids go and study in Spain for a semester. Like, we go over there, whatever, they do a semester in an MBA program in Spain. It's really kind of partially a vacation. They're getting some credits, and they're just kind of going over there and having fun.
Taste the food, the flavor of the world. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Maybe get a little more well-rounded or something. Okay, cool. That's not what the Chinese are doing when they're sending people to the United States. They're sending elite researchers coming to the United States to study at a U.S. university, particularly as a J1. Like, these aren't students. These are research scholars. These are elite scientists. These are people who are accomplished in their field, but more importantly, have ties to the party infrastructure. They just don't let anybody go. It's not like you can be like, hey, I'm popping over to University of Pittsburgh for 2 years. You've got to get permission from the government, and you really have to be part of that infrastructure. And that's what we saw with her, really active on our campus, and really well. And then the mathematics part, like, this isn't like, when we started this research, we prioritized who we were looking at because we had over 10,000 J visa scholars to look at. We said, look, I probably would rather have an American in the fine arts department at Yale. I'd probably rather. But at the end of the day, the espionage threat to America is not in the fine arts department at Yale. It is in the mathematics department. I mean, whether it's quantum computing, whether it's advanced algorithms. This is kind of the bread and butter of what you're doing in a mathematics department. And this is not like Tom saying, hey, this has some defense application here. This is the United States military saying, yeah, you know what? We believe this has defense applications. We believe that so much that we're going to give you money to pursue this research. And and her department, funded by the service branches. So, I am particularly frustrated that that our universities have not taken this more seriously. Look, I'm very good at my job. My team's very good at their job. We work hard to do this research, but this is all open source information. This is us, this is us going and looking and saying, hey, is there a concern here? And there's 2 million federal bureaucrats and 7 people working for AAF. We could find this stuff. They're not looking or they don't care.
See, this is what I don't understand. We're not even talking about, okay, the 3rd generation, Chinese heritage or something. We're talking about people that went to university, went to the military in China, dual citizens. To me, it's inconceivable that the CCP is not communicating with these people. Because if you go in each field where they want to infiltrate, even if the person from the get-go wasn't a bad actor, isn't it true that, their family is going to be in China? So if they give them a call on the phone and say, hey, we want you to do some things for us. Well, gee, I mean, how is that not a security threat?
It's 100% a security threat. And that is exactly what happens. We've seen this, not in this research project, but in other research, we've seen the Chinese be very aggressive about threatening families of individuals that are in the United States. They know that's a bargaining chip that they have. And China's not the United States. It's not a free country. It's not, the command and control from the government is just qualitatively different than what we're used to here. And look, I bellyache about United States government all the time. I'd like to think I'm a professional at it. But the mistreatment from our government it pales in comparison to how the Chinese abuse their citizens and how they have daily control over the lives of individuals that live in that country. And everyone over here from China knows that. And I mean, look, we've seen it at campuses around the country where there's mobs of Chinese nationals harassing either dissident Chinese or Taiwanese nationals on campus and making life miserable for them, and then reporting back home on that. So yeah, you're exactly right. These folks that are in these critical spaces know that if the CCP comes calling, that they got to be helpful. But
again, you don't even have to limit it to people that might be, yeah, I'm coming to America, I hate China, I'm done with that. That would still be a problem because they'll have family there and they could be threatened. But then you have people that directly worked for their government industries. You have this guy, Gang, in Penn State University, utilizing research on AI and LLMs to enhance lightweight materials that are used in military vehicles, aircraft, naval systems. He worked at Los Alamos as well. And yet you write he's listed as an overseas rep for a Chinese government program designed to transfer back technology to China. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched us on this at the beginning. The Chinese are serious about this. This is not an ad hoc program. The 1,000 Talents program is a explicit, clearly laid out program where they use overseas assets, individuals, to recruit Americans, oftentimes, Americans with Chinese heritage, to help pipeline science and technology back to China. Sometimes extracting, we saw this up at BU, getting American researchers to move over to China and really kind of exfiltrating that knowledge. So that is the concern when we're seeing those relationships. That's just too critical of a threat to allow into elite U.S. universities. Again, we focused on a lot of the universities we focused on were because they had a military service lab research institute at the university. They're not picking these places by accident. Penn State, an example, as well as they have the ARL as a research lab that the Navy runs up there. So, it's not like this guy's bumping around at some community college where he's not going to, cross paths with folks that are doing defense critical research. He's at an institution that the United States military said, hey, look, we have a footprint here. We have a longstanding footprint here. And that's, I think it's important for listeners to understand is the scientific community, it's by nature collegial. You're moving back and forth. You're working with your peers. That's great for kind of exchange of ideas for the scientific discovery.
Yep.
But man, it's also really incredibly powerful for developing relationships and creating assets and creating espionage risk. It's a way to develop relationships, which if what you want to do is understand how the United States government and its research enterprise is postured to tackle the PLA, which is, I think, unquestionably the leading threat in the 21st century. If you want to understand where we're focusing our research, bumping around the hallways at the universities with the people who are doing that research, that's exactly the way you get that understanding. Where are they focusing? What are they? They're focusing on drone research because, wow, they've watched things in the Ukraine and in Gaza and realized that tanks are incredibly susceptible to overhead attacks. And maybe we need to really get to the forefront of how we, either deploy drone countermeasures or, develop drone software that makes them able to operate kind of in what's called edge computing, where they don't need to be able to ping back home. You get that knowledge by moving around with people that do that research. And that's where we're seeing folks in the report doing exactly those types of things.
So you have this guy, I'm not even going to pronounce his name, at Carnegie Mellon, that works on edge computing related to drone swarm technology, which is that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room with this emerging warfare, that makes tanks so vulnerable. And he was, you write, he was an active and enthusiastic member of the CCP before coming to the U.S. and working on research directly connected to the Army and Navy.
Yeah, 100%. This guy, we have copies of the speeches. He was, super bright guy. Like this guy's brilliant. Not, essentially the equivalent of like a valedictorian in his class at like what essentially would be an equivalent to like an MIT. This guy's giving this valedictorian speech and extolling the virtues of the party and talking to his peers about how science and technology need to be a part of the workers' dream and fulfilling the workers' paradise that the Chinese Communist Party is working to put in place in China. And it's shocking. I mean, one, it's shocking because it's terrible policy and it's a terrible way to develop your society. But it's shocking because it's right out there. You look at this guy, you do some searching on him, you're like, holy moly. And then he's coming to Carnegie Mellon, which has an undersecretary of defense lab that one of the focuses is software research with a focus on this drone research. Look, like even kind of the entertaining stuff where we see the drones moving around at 4th of July, festivities and stuff, like kind of stuff, that's fun to watch. But when you take that and you make that a military application where you can coordinate drones to attack in different spaces and to cripple infrastructure, look, we saw it. You saw it in the Ukraine with what they did with the attack on the Russian base. But look, we've also got Chinese property essentially on the fence line of U.S. military facilities in all over the countries, particularly in Middle America. That ability to kind of put drones airborne and have them coordinate and kind of just point and shoot and devastate a flight line and cripple air capabilities is real. And so, like, the Chinese get that. That's why they're putting people into work. We get that. But what I don't get is how we don't get that we shouldn't at least, kind of subsidize the knowledge export through allowing these researchers to come to our elite institutions. Carnegie Mellon is an outstanding institution. It is some of the brightest engineers and scientists in America are studying there and researching there. Why we're letting people from China come in and kind of sop up that knowledge is incredibly frustrating and really difficult for me to understand.
No, I mean, it's inexplicable. It just doesn't make any sense. And that would be true if there was some prima facie appearing as a geeky scientist. But
Right.
What you found is it's not just that they're coming here to study in programs and research and be involved with technological programs that are for the development of weapons in the military, but they also had background in the Chinese, either military or defense industry. Could you describe how you found some of them come from this 7 Sons of National Defense in China? What is that?
Yeah, that is, so the Chinese have a kind of a cadre of universities that they have designated that are critical to the defense science and research infrastructure in a way that we really don't do here. They've really focused on these 7 institutions to pipeline their top talent through that, so that the People's Liberation Army and the PLA Navy and kind of their industrial base has the best scientists, so they're pumping them out. We do it, we don't really have that. Yes, we send defense funding through, MIT or through Stanford or some of these schools, but it's not focused in the way that the United States has made a decision that our DoD industrial base is going to go through these 8 schools. The Chinese have, and that's a critical distinction, because the integration is so close. There's a faculty infrastructure, a mentor infrastructure that exists largely to support the military and the industrial complex in China, to equip and give capabilities to their army. And then what we see is, okay, you kind of have folks come through, they'll do their master's, their PhD there at one of those schools, and then they'll end up at U.S. universities on a postdoc on the J visas. You talked about the J visas earlier. That's what we focused only on the J visas, because that's the data set we have. There's problems in there's O visas, there's H-1Bs, there's the OPTs you talked about.
And then clearly the F visa, the student visa, that's definitely where there's hundreds of thousands. That's probably going to create a pipeline.
Yeah. And that's, so that's what we saw at Indiana University. The guy who's on the cover of our report, he comes over on an F visa, makes friends with one of his colleagues there. Great, does a whole bunch of cool chemistry research, goes back to China for about 10 years, brings his friend from IU over a couple times to China, and then now has come back to Indiana University, and is doing chemistry research there. Found a picture of the guy literally holding a hammer and sickle flag. He's an active member of one of the kind of China has these kind of fake sub-political parties that are controlled by the CCP. He was the leader of the student campus chapter of CDL in China, which is essentially a front party for the CCP, literally holding a hammer and sickle flag. This guy is at Indiana University now. And Indiana University has had serious problems with researcher abuse and misconduct, as well as some other universities. So that kind of...
Wait, this guy, Dr. Chen, you're talking about, I just want to say, so you're saying her mentor was recently fired and had his home raided by the FBI.
That's a different bad actor at IU. So there's
okay.
So there's a bunch. There's a Shulin Zhu, who is a chemistry professor. This is the guy with the CCP flag. And then there's a woman you spoke of who is working on AI research, who the FBI frog marched her mentor out of his office because they had to raid his office for academic misconduct, for essentially stealing from the United States government. He's under current active indictment by the FBI and had his office raided by DHS. Yet somehow we can't figure out that, hey, maybe this person that has a clear history of academic misconduct and what looks like intellectual property theft, maybe we don't let him populate his lab with all of his friends from China. That's kind of the other interesting point. If you got a minute, I'd really like to kind of talk about one of the underlying things that we discovered that we didn't expect when we started doing this research.
Yeah. So I want to get there. Where this is bad enough of a clear and present danger when you have, who knows? I mean, how many of these people there are? You showcased 21 of them because you just wanted to find definitive, provable connections. But I think we all understand that, again, it's not some poor loser that is able to, sign up on their, travel documents there. Yeah, I'm gonna study backdoor attacks of AI systems in a U.S. university, and you're just some Chinese dissident. No, I mean, prima facie, you're gonna be a member of the CCP. They're gonna know about you. So it's there's endless number. Who knows how many of these people? But it's not just a matter of individuals. So once they start getting into labs, then they bring in their friends. Yeah. Sort of what we see with India, with these companies that get a certain percentage H-1B, and then before you know it, you ain't getting hired there if you're not Indian. That's its own set of challenges and debates, mainly debated from the labor market standpoint. There probably is a little bit of trade theft concern there too. But now you move this over to the Chinese discussion, What does that look like in terms of the pipeline of future researchers and recruiters?
Yeah. So unfortunately, what it looks like is you have this kind of progression, a ladder of visa abuse. You come over on your F visa as a student, cool, maybe you get a little bit of taste. You come back as a J1 scholar, and you're kind of a research scholar, professor. This is the other important thing, just as an aside. A lot of times these folks are not doing classroom instruction. What they're doing is research. They're working in the research lab. So you come over as a J1 and you do some work for a while, and you kind of bump up the hierarchy. And then what happens oftentimes is they'll transition into something like an H-1B or an O visa, and they end up running a lab. Okay, so they've got the Zheng lab, wherever that is, and they're getting federal funding. So they get federal funding. It's they've got a grant, and the grant has so many FTEs next to it in funding. Great. So it's not like what they do is look around and go, hey, the United States Department of Defense is funding this research program in my lab. I think I should hire some recent, PhDs from Indiana University, some American guys that have been. No. What they do is they look around and they end up importing, and we see it on numerous occasions at numerous labs throughout the country. We saw a University of Wisconsin, great example. They've got a nuclear engineering research lab that's run by a Chinese national who went to the Chinese Institute of Science and Technology, who is hiring Chinese J visas into his lab to do nuclear engineering work. Even if it's just commercial energy nuclear engineering, it's appalling that we're doing that. But we have found oftentimes it's research funded by the NNSA, the National Nuclear Security Administration. The people who do U.S. stockpile stewardship are funding research at labs led by Chinese nationals who are hiring other Chinese nationals to do the research. So what you end up with is just labs run completely by foreigners. And that would be bad enough because it's kind of an economic problem. Like we spend decades putting people through the pipeline of a PhD program. But it's not.
We've seen this with the Indians and H-1Bs that I have a son who's 15, extraordinarily talented in computers, and good luck getting a job in a lot of these fields because it's a cultural it's a cultural gerrymander of Americans. This has been a big point of contention among conservatives in recent years, but this is, when you're dealing with China, everything's heightened because you mentioned the O visa. So everyone's trying to debate, well, what is extraordinary? What's a run-of-the-mill guy that we're just having a visa mill? Okay, well, yeah, let's say that these guys are O visa extraordinarily talented, but extraordinarily talented to do what?
Right.
On behalf of whom?
And I think that's the important distinction here. It's problematic if it's just like our quirky German colleagues from the other side of the Atlantic. That's okay. We should probably prioritize Americans first, but I'm not going to get as worked up about the positions being taken by some really brilliant German engineer. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is you've got folks working in biotechnology, drone software research, nuclear engineering, quantum computing from China. And China's not our quirky little neighbor on the other side of the Pacific. They are our number one military adversary. So there is no reason we should be educating these folks. The unfortunate part of it is, and I don't know that it's a secret, but the dirty little fact about this is one, they're cheaper than U.S. nationals for the research positions. Yep. They're being hired by their friends, so it's kind of coming at free, like not coming out of high for the university. And when you look at the student side of it, it's about 280,000 Chinese nationals studying in the United States on student visas. They all come and pay full freight. And the universities are like, this is a cash cow.
This is the Chinese elite. The Chinese government makes sure the money is there.
Exactly.
It will be paid. And look, unfortunately, President Trump has made this point himself where he said, well, then the universities would go bankrupt, and therein lies the problem.
Yeah, look, there is a solution to this problem. I think we can get off of the sauce of cheap foreign students if we start downsizing and eliminating some of the garbage programs we have at our universities. Our universities have a lot of just, fluff that they don't need. Let's get rid of those programs, fill the spots in places that really matter with American nationals who have, spent the time trying to get in and can't get admitted because the spots are taken by Chinese national, Indian national, whoever it is. it's just, I mean, it ends up being fundamentally unfair. And then, like we said, when it comes to the Chinese, it's dangerous. Like at the end, like the end of this story is the People's Liberation Army wants to kill us. Like, and I'm not being hyperbolic about this. There is a decent chance that there's an Indo-Pacific war in the next 30 years. And we're on the receiving end of attacks from the People's Liberation Army, the People's Liberation Navy. And they're going to, and what we are doing right now is equipping them with the science to build the technology that's going to kill young men and women, that's going to kill our sons and daughters.
It's the wherewithal and it's the motive. It's not just the hatred. Like, honestly, if you put a gun to my head and said, would you rather have one of the guys you showcased in your report in charge of this or like a free Palestine dude, I'd probably pick the latter as vile as they are. And obviously you don't want the Islamic terrorists getting this technology, but here it's a well-oiled machine that you're fueling, that its modality of attack against America is greased with this asymmetric warfare. We give it to them for free. It's the it's the front door. This is not back door. It's the front door. Before I want to get to solutions, federal and state, but before that, I want to broach one issue. I haven't seen it in your report. Maybe it is. I haven't read the whole thing yet. The Chinese labs on our soil. So this sounds really freaky. But increasingly, it seems like I haven't followed up on this much, but in 2022, you had in Reedley, California, this biohazardous material that seemed to be operated by Chinese nationals that came to light because just last month, they discovered what appeared to be a linked location in Las Vegas.
Yeah, Nevada,
Yeah, where they had, deadly pathogens like HIV, malaria, and SARS-CoV-2. And then last June, 2 Chinese nationals were charged with attempting to smuggle in this, pathogens to was it University of Michigan lab?
It was University of Michigan.
How much of this is connected? Is this a separate threat of these autonomous Chinese labs?
No, so let's start with the last part there. The 2 folks at University of Michigan are in the data set that we use to do our research. They were J visa scholars. And they were smuggling biotechnology in without reporting it to CBP. So there's something going on here. I'll be the first. I don't have the answer, but there's too many incidents you've got stuff up in Maine where they're cooperating with drug labs up there. You've got stuff you saw in Vegas.
Marijuana growers. I just saw a report on that in Maine. You also have in Oklahoma. It's a big problem. Epic Times had a pretty good very detailed story on that. So they're involved in a lot of organized crime on our soil. And again, I mean, if you seed the country with, like we talked about, the green cards are enormous, student visas, J visas, you put it all together, they don't even have to do work for it. I mean, if even a fraction of them are doing that sort of stuff, espionage, counterintelligence, it's a problem.
Well, right. And that's where we started when we started this project, is we had 10,974 names. And our thought was, well, let's say 1% of those folks are spies, are active, managed assets in the United States. That's about 110 folks at our elite institutions who are out and out spies. And look, I think the number is much higher than 1%.
Oh, yeah.
So, again, it kind of gets back to the theme you've been talking about. This is not ad hoc. This is organized. This is well-funded. This is well-populated with a large number of individuals who are working incredibly hard at this. The Chinese are taking this seriously, and they're putting people and resources. If you want to win at something, you put money and people next to it. That's how you win all kinds of fights. Our government is doing neither of that when it comes to these threats. We don't appear to be putting anything in the way of investigators next to smoking out these individuals. And I don't know that we're putting serious financial resources next to giving them the capabilities to do this. It's a big problem. Investigating 10,000 people, that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of bodies. I mean, we did it, and we only got, we only got through about 1,000 of folks. And that was when we just threw out your journalism majors and your fine arts folks that got rid of multiple hundreds. Our government's not doing that. And that's the part that really worries and upsets me. I mean, look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a bunch of folks in skiffs somewhere that all they do every day is get up and research this and find the bad guys. But, other than the folks at Michigan and a couple isolated cases here and there, there's been very few arrests related to Chinese activities in the United States.
Yes, and it's the fundamentals of how the F, J, and H and even O visas from China continue unabated. I guess this past year, it seems like the evidence 2025, it's been down slightly just because of across the board, immigration, the Trump administration has clamped down on some immigration, but I don't see evidence in the numbers so far that there is a particular focus to get the numbers down from China more than anywhere else. And that is concerning. One of the things that I was curious about when reading about this, I don't know much about secret clearances, but if you're working in a lab on materials and research for the U.S. military weapons, wouldn't you need a security clearance? And are these J visa holders from China getting security?
So by and large, no. So there, the research we're looking at is all unclassified research, but they're oftentimes working next to folks with clearances. Like we had an example of an individual whose mentor was the lead advisor for the Navy's Doggerland Proving Ground, where they test weapons for the Navy. So while the Chinese guy doesn't have a clearance, his mentor clearly does, and his mentor is integrated into the Navy's research program. We got the pictures of his mentor standing next to an artillery piece. So that's kind of how you work the process, and that's how there can be spills of information, there can be relationships developed. Even if you don't have a clearance, it's still a serious problem to have these folks who are from an aggressively hostile country literally sitting in the same lab with our defense researchers. So it's a serious problem. I do want to say, look, I want to give the Trump administration the benefit of the doubt, because they were very serious about this during the first administration. They had a China initiative that had the FBI focused on this, and it got shut down at the beginning of the Biden administration, and it went dormant. So, look, maybe, I want to give the benefit of the doubt because it takes time to spin this up, because the program was mothballed. Everybody was sent off to do other stuff, seems like targeting some of the conservative folks in the conservative movement as opposed to targeting foreign nationalists, but whatever. But the FBI stopped doing this work because the Biden administration was too worried about being called racist than they were worried about, basically giving capabilities to our adversaries. So I'm hopeful that the administration is doing this. I'm a big fan of Kash Patel. I think he's serious about reforming the institution. So I'm hopeful that there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm not seeing.
But Tom, it's more fundamental. So I understand what you mean. There's the research into the individual people already here,
right?
But then there's just the macro policy. Like, what the hell with all these visas from China? It just doesn't make any sense.
Look, Mike Braun, Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott could fix this in 3 huge states in an afternoon. Executive order, flagship institutions, public universities will not accept any more J1 visa scholars. Boom. That fundamentally changes. Like, that order coming down from high to the state universities really changes this.
So I want to be very clear here so people understand. Even though states, you don't think of visa policy, it's set by the feds, and you're right, they can't issue or revoke a visa, but what they can say is a state university, that's not an immigration policy, that's an admissions policy. We're not going to admit people on these visas in general, certainly from China. If we can't confirm that they're not members of CCP, which you'll have trouble confirming that they're not.
Right.
That's a state policy. If it's a state university, there's no question they can do that. They could probably set some policies maybe for private universities as well, like Carnegie Mellon, perhaps. But you have Indiana University. That's a state with a Republican supermajority trifecta there. That should be looked at. We should not be having, people. Again, it's OPT is part of it as well. They could affect a lot of this stuff. So
it's twofold. Like, one, you could promulgate a policy from Indianapolis, Austin, Tallahassee, wherever, it says, look, we're not gonna recruit any more Chinese nationals to our department. So that's kind of the low hanging fruit. But these visas are all tied to employment. So if you're really serious about the problem and you think, hey, maybe I shouldn't have espionage threats at my state flagship university, you can also say, we're just going to revoke the employment of these folks that have been identified as security threats. And if look, maybe Harvard goes and picks them up. I don't know. But if they lose their employment, they're going to lose their J visa at the universities and hopefully leave the country. Like, this problem is not hard to solve. It's like most things in politics, it's getting the will to actually implement the solutions that is really the problem here. But look, like, there's 3 states off the bat that could crush it on this. Some places like Tennessee as well, I think, could do some really amazing work. Utah. There's places where governors can jump on top of fixing these problems.
And it's so low hanging because like, we're polarized and divided as hell in this country. But as it relates to China, nobody wants this.
Right.
I mean, this is something that really, every side accuses the others of being bought out by China. No one wants to be caught dead, being in the back pocket of the CCP. And this is, again, if we're going to have, obviously we have this paralysis at the federal level, not to, shut off the visas. Obviously, I wish Trump would do it unilaterally, but it is what it is. Your point is, especially in the red states, if you have, if you're on the governor's staff and you have these names already identified, you could do your own research. And then in terms of a macro policy, why are we accepting that? Maybe the feds issue them a visa, but we're not going to allow them here. And like you noted, if you terminate them, then that triggers federal policy and they can't remain here unless they get another job. So that's definitely something we could do at a state level. At the federal level, have you been in touch with Congressman Muller of Michigan, the chair of the subcommittee on China?
Yeah, we've been at Congress, been in contact with a lot of folks on the intelligence committees, folks on the homeland committees, folks on the China committee. They are very receptive to this. As a former congressional investigator, like, I am incredibly sympathetic to the lack of staffing and the difficulty of doing these. Like, I think people watch too much West Wing and think that, like, the United States Congress is like this sprawling, infrastructure of millions of locusts going to work on problems. It's often
legislative branches, state and federal, they are completely understaffed relative to the size and scope of the state and federal executive branches.
Exactly. So, like, I get it that they don't have the bodies to sit down and do the work. Like, this work was my team and the team that did the work in China, digging through people's backgrounds and putting together this and double fact checking and making sure everything's super tight. It is hard, tedious work. So that's why I think you haven't seen some of this from the Hill. But look, the incredibly positive reception from the Hill and from the administration. They're like, hey, this is incredibly helpful information. We're going to use it. It's getting digested. I think in a lot of places, we're pushing on an open door here, and they're happy to see this work. We want to do more of it. Like I said, we only went through about 1,000. There's another 9,000 folks that we could dig through, that we could start putting together this background. And we can really start making some change here, because like, there's no constituency for hiring Chinese nationals at U.S. universities. When, the guy at IU, when he got fired because of academic misconduct, the only people that came to his defense were the Association of American University professors. Absolutely no one cares about those people. Like, everybody else in the state was like, this is shocking. Like, how did we let this happen here? So this is a home run for every governor that, one, it's a political winner, but two, it's just the right thing to do. Like, these folks are a threat. We need these positions for U.S. researchers. Like, it takes a long time to get a PhD in a STEM discipline, to get a master's degree in engineering. We invest this time and energy into educating these folks. And then they go, and the ones that want to go into academia look around and go, well, where do I get a job? Oh, I don't get a job because they're all taken by foreign nationals. That's a problem that we need to fix. We should fix. And I'm hopeful some of these governors kind of grab the issue by the lapels and shake it and make some changes.
Yep. No, they could do it systemically at the university level, and obviously we need to deal with this at the immigration level. Yeah. We're about out of time, Tom, but there's so much more to go over. Can you just kind of give a brief pitch of what the American Accountability Foundation is and some of the body of work that you do?
Sure. So we are, we're built with like campaign opposition research people. We talked about this at the beginning. Like I come from the campaign world, and what we focus on at the American Accountability Foundation is the people on the left that really pose a threat to the traditional American values that we care about. So we research those individuals, bring information to the debate so that we can disrupt their efforts to execute on their agenda. But we do our best to keep it people focused, but we use research as a tool. We're not an idea shop. We're not a think tank. We are a research firm that will bring you information that makes it difficult for the left to do their job, and very aggressively focused on influencing the debate. We are an outcome and an impact focused organization. We want to change the debate. We want to make good things happen for our country. We want to protect the communities that we care about and the traditional values that we love. And we think research disrupts the abilities of the left to execute on their agenda.
Particularly when it's focused on the human capital driving it, because at the end of the day, they could talk about AI all they want, but you aren't going to replace human beings.
Exactly.
Human beings are, what drives the world for good and for bad, and you're focused on the bad actors. So again, American Accountability Foundation, check it out. Tom, we'll have to do this again soon. Thanks so much for the presentation.
Hey, great talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Take care. So folks, again, that was Tom Jones, and just absolutely terrific work. Talk about high human capital. Again, he's someone I worked with during the Tea Party era. He would help with conservative candidates in primaries, and that's where he comes from. And then he worked on the Hill, and now working on this. So it's a very good report, and I love where his brain is thinking. This is something we need to push in the red states. We talk a lot about H-1B, OPT, F-1, but this J-1 visa, the Chinese researchers in our labs, I mean, what the heck? How does that even get off the ground and persist for one day? Let's end it here. Let me know your comments, questions, concerns. As always, you could subscribe and like Horowitz Show on YouTube or iTunes as well. You could subscribe to our Substack at Liberating Truths, and of course at RM Conservative on X, to the extent that the algorithms don't censor me. Till tomorrow, God bless you all, and thank you for listening.